Hello, and welcome to another episode of Set Musings, my favourite Magic the Gathering videos that I do. I always have great fun doing these. Always brings a smile to my face going through these older sets. So, in terms of the way I'm going to work through this today, as I mentioned in previous videos, I had one or two various issues, and this has happened over a number of videos, not just recently, but it's been happening. Probably people haven't been aware of it because sometimes I've reshot sections or reshot a video, or I've noticed it when I've been prepping for a video. So I'm looking at ways to just cut down on the number of tabs I have open, and that really sort of did come to a head with Future Sight. Anybody knows the set will know there's just an eye-watering amount of stuff in the set, in terms of themes and mechanics, keywords, abilities. I'll show you my cheat sheet in a moment that I'm going to start doing now because I'm not going to have all the tabs open. So I'm going to do this going forward for the moment, and obviously this has come to a head because of the complexity of the most recent sets, both the Ravnica block and this particular block that Future Sight forms a part of, is just the complexity of the sets. And so what I'm going to be doing is, you'll notice I do have more than one tab open, so I do still have multiple tabs, I just don't have so many. So the idea is for me to have tabs which have very rough search criteria for Scryfall in them, and then I will on the fly alter those. I actually quite enjoyed last week's episode where I was doing that. I don't think I had quite as many tabs open to start with, but it was nice to be able to just interact as I'm talking rather than just purely clicking the tabs. It just actually made me think of more things to talk about. So as you probably gather, it's a big episode. Let me just show you this is my sort of notepad cheat sheet. So I've sort of copied this in from MTG Wiki, the top section there, and just cleaned it up a bit. But you can see here, we've got, okay, themes and mechanics. There's 5 broadly, but look at all of these, plus all the cycles as well, which I'll be looking at off camera. I don't have those all listed here, so I've got an MTG Wiki page open actually on a separate screen to help me navigate that. So we're going to go through that. That's the first thing, just the way this has changed, so you'll know going forward sort of how I'm going to do this. Once we get over this block, then before we move into the next block, what I'm going to start doing is introducing into the Set Musings core sets. I deliberately didn't do them previously because the core sets were essentially just reprints by the very first limited edition stuff, and my original plan was to start introducing core sets once we got to M10, because there 50% of the set is actually new cards. Now of course what it dawned on me is that the next set chronologically from Future Sight is in fact 10th edition, so it's the core set before M10, which was the next core set after it. And also with the core sets at this point, they were going every 2 years up to 10th edition. Once we get up to M10, then they switch over to being every year. 10th edition is going to be in there for a couple of reasons, well, several reasons actually. One is there are some interesting cycle reprints in there. It's also the first set to have core set to have, I think, Legendaries printed in it. The first core set since the limited edition sets to have black borders on there. That's the first core set, and it was probably most important for me. It was the core set in which I acquainted myself with Magic. I actually went out and bought Magic product. I've been aware of Magic before then, but that was the first set where I actually went out and bought something. So yeah, so that's the next video from now into the next week's video, and subsequent Commander Durdle episode will be 10th edition. In terms of this week, obviously we've got the set musings that'll go out on Monday. Wednesday we've got the corresponding Future Sight episode of Commander Durdle, and I'll come on to that at the end of the video. The commander that's come up as a result of my sort of semi-random shenanigans with booster packs. And then the Friday video, as you know, I've been trying something new, and I'm alternating between Magic videos that involve some sort of physical cards on camera and non-Magic videos. So recently I did do I think 4 videos last week, because I wanted to include that additional video on top of the set musings for the most recent set for the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. Got it right again. Set. So I did a 4th video last week, and that was a video to do with a book. So the next one is going to be back to some sort of art appreciation of Magic cards with physical cards. Probably an ASMR type video where I don't really say little or nothing, and then we'll be back to a non-Magic video, and that can be really pulled down from anything. It might be another interesting non-Magic deck of cards, it might be an interesting book, or like an old magazine, an old music magazine that I've kept hold of, or an old, might even be at some point an old Magic the Gathering magazine that I've sort of dug up, quite possibly. But also, and I know someone, when I suggested it, did say they would quite like for me to do it, and that's just a rummage through my vinyl collection. So all of those things are on the card, and that Friday video will alternate between physical Magic something and non-Magic stuff, but again on camera rather than on screen, if you like these videos are. So anyway, back to what we're doing today. It was a bit of a long preamble, but I always like to, let people know what they're letting themselves in for when they start to watch the channel. So we're going to go through now, have a look at Future Sight. It's a small set, 180 cards, 60 commons, 60 uncommons, 60 rares. Again, the shifted cards, the future shifted or time shifted, whatever you want to call them, cards were actually within that 180. The first set of the block was the one where they sort of literally were a separate entity, if you like. These ones are part of it, but you can see here, good example is the Avon Mind Center sensor, quite a different border, and that was a key indicator for these being future shifted cards, time shifted cards. Number of things got introduced in this set, just eye-watering amounts of stuff. I don't know if many people know this, but and it would have been amusing if they did that. The set was also due to include Planeswalker cards. The design wasn't ready, and so they ended up putting them in Lorwyn, which made things a little bit weird in terms of thematically, from my understanding. But imagine if this set had also had Planeswalkers in it, if you're familiar with this set. So yeah, that would have been just off the charts. And you can see we've got this futuristic card frame as well here. As with a small set, no specific basic land for this set. Any theme decks that were produced would have had the land from the main set, from the large set, the first set of the block. Came out in 2007. Yeah, May the 4th, 2007. And again with this, just be careful. I'm not always good at doing this because there's so many here. So some of these mechanics might be new and some are going to be existing. So I'll try this quickly actually, just so you get a rough orientation. So Bloodthirst, Convoke, Cycling Dredge, Graft, Hellbent, Scry and Transmute are all reused mechanics from previous sets. Lifelink, Reach and Shroud had been in Magic before, but they were newly keyworded abilities. And they, in that case, they'd been normally fully spelt out. And then there were a number of new mechanics for the set. So get this: Absorb, Death Touch, Delve, Fate Seal, Fortify, Frenzy, Grandeur, Gravestorm, Lifelink, Poisonous, Reach. That was a bit of a clear up, where they'd, again, you could argue that was an introduction of a keyword, but it also cleared up confusions posed by that in text where it says this creature may block as though it had flying, that sort of thing. Frequently with spiders. Shroud, Aura Swap, Transfigure, a tribal card type, and what's called type cycling. So that might be things like, wizard cycling, that sort of thing, as opposed to land cycling. So yeah. So let us start this delve into this set. So I'm just going to scroll through quickly because it is nice to get an overall sort of art-wise appreciation of the set. And you can see already we're starting to see these cards. We'll get on in a moment to exactly how many cards in the set were future shifted. You can see here, and I'll talk a little bit about this, slivers. Notice with the way this is, it's in, the mana's in a completely different spot. So the idea, of course, what they wanted to do is make the borders look futuristic like, from a point of just the look, but also, this is possibly what, a magic border might look like in the future through that particular future shifted lens. You see some legends in here as well. And it's particularly nice with the vanilla creatures. There was a bit of a sort of vanilla creature thing going on, I think, in the block as well. I don't know if this was the one that had a cycle of vanilla creatures or not, but I'll know when I get there. Okay. Not a super amount of multicoloured cards for this. You can see there's a 5 colour there that we'll go back to. Okay, so 81 cards out of that total of 180. That's a lot. Were future shifted. One thing I didn't mention, I don't think, is how the slots worked in the boosters. And how they did this was it was a bit wobbly. In the other ones we've been through and we've seen how that was a bit more locked in, but so in the boosters, regular number for rarities, so 1 rare, 3 uncommons and 11 uncommons. Sorry, I'll start again, my mistake there. Sorry, 1 rare, 3 uncommons and 11 commons, but a varying number of future shifted cards. And that, I understand from the notes here, could be anything between 5 and 10 across the different rarities in those packs. And again, if you want to find them on the channel, I've I've done pack openings for this particular set as well. I physically opened this product in the form of boosters. And again, you've seen many of these already as I scroll through, because there were so many in the set. As a percentage of the total set. And those vanilla creatures, you notice, are starting to pop in each of the colours by the look of things. Some other interesting cards as well that we need to talk about. Again, with this set, you'll notice there might be occasionally a slight imbalance in the lands, in terms of, there were some lands that didn't form part of a cycle. So indestructible was a thing in the block. Didn't crop up much. There was just one indestructible card in here, and it was on Darksteel Garrison. And it was a fortification. So Fortified Land is indestructible. Whenever Fortified Land becomes tapped, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Fortify 3. Attach target land you control. Attached to a target land you control. Fortify only as a sorcery. This card comes into play unattached and stays in play if the land leaves play. So it's interesting. Like it's almost like equipment for land. Maybe. This is in the mystery boosters actually. You'll notice this as well. There's several instances where I do searches and there is just one card in the set, which was this. I would have drafted this as part of the block probably when I did that modern era MTGO. They did a year of drafting modern, and I don't have a specific memory of this, but I imagine it was to have been really tricky, me trying to get set up for that and trying to do that. So another thing in the set in terms of themes and mechanics. So what we had is a type of sliver, and there were 6 slivers, and no doubt when we come to do the cycles you'll see that indeed these were part of a cycle. Also we had the 5-colour Sliver Legion, so all sliver creatures get +1/+1 for each other sliver in play. So that was handy, a legendary creature sliver. Now we also had Spell Shapers, so I'm going to just see. Let's have a look here, because sometimes they're included as a type Spell Shaper. Sometimes in sets you might find that it has the word Spell Shaper in the name. So again, with some of these often the themes and mechanics also may equate to a cycle as well. There are actually 6, so one from each of the sets. Sorry, one from each of the colours, and in this case an artifact creature. I'm pretty sure these are going to be a cycle that I'm going to be talking about. So I'm just looking through now actually to see. I'm going to be talking about these anyway, so I'll go through these here because I do want to just talk a little bit about how they relate to other cards in Magic's history. But I just wanted to show you there the number of Spell Shapers in total is actually 6. Now let's have a look and see. So what you'll notice is there's no type of Thallid, but neither is there anything with Thallid in the name. So let's just see, because I know Thallids were a thing. So we've got this set of funguses in the set. And the reason why I bring this up is because the other Thalids in the set, in the block, sorry, were creature type of fungus, and you'll notice that a number of them produce like counters, stuff like that. So there's interesting interactions going on between things that are just funguses, but also that things that are funguses and they are Thalids as well. So just a heads up there. I'm just going to look and see if there was any reference at all to... No, none in there. So yes, a Thalid theme still, but that was purely through you know, the fact that there were a number of funguses, of which there was a relationship between fungus and Thalid in the block as a whole. There was also a tribal theme as well, which is difficult to in some instances it can be difficult to search for, because of course you're searching for different oops, I didn't mean to do that. You're searching for different creature types, but oops. You're searching for different creature types, but there was a type of tribal in here, so tribal enchantment in there, and that's something you'll notice later on as we get on to sets after this, the introduction of tribal spells basically. But no doubt if you were to go through this, you'll probably see, you know, the set as a whole, there may well be certain different creature types as well, which we tend to see, you know, a lot of. So there were 18 humans, yeah, we have 14 wizards, yeah, that sort of thing going on. I don't know whether 6 zombies. And a good way to see what's going on tribally is to sort of have a look and see, you know, not only the amount of a particular tribe, but how they're represented across the rarities, because then it's going to be more likely, if they're at a lower rarity, tribal is something you could draft to as well. So yeah, so tribal was a thing. Now let's get on to the individual keywords in here. It should be slightly easier. So we've got a single absorb card. So with absorb 1, if a source would deal damage to a sliver, prevent 1 of that damage. So it's the only card here with absorb on it, and because it's a sliver card, it gives it to all other sliver cards. And then again, remember the interaction of slivers was across the board. It wasn't asymmetrical as it got to be later on. Now we also had something called assemble, and I'm sure we've seen this later on with contraptions as well. We've got a rigger creature here. There's only one in here. If a rigger you control would assemble a contraption, it assembles 2 contraptions instead. So do we have any contraptions in the set? Probably not. So we had this thing called Aura Swap. So I'm going to have to do that. And there was just one Aura Swap card. So 2 and a blue, in this case, exchange this aura with an aura card in your hand. It basically pretty much does what it's called. Next one, Bloodthirst. So single Bloodthirst card. Bloodthirst 1, if an opponent was dealt damage this turn, this creature comes into play with a +1/+1 counter on it. There's also flanking in the set. We got Convoke, 3 Convoke cards. So with Convoke, each creature you tap while playing the spell reduces the total cost by 1 or by 1 mana of that creature's colour. Again, we've seen this in later sets. Now, cycling's interesting. So you'll see here, in addition to regular cycling in the set, although cycling with some sort of cost, we have got ones with 2 life. There was this type cycling. So we've got Sliver cycling and Wizard cycling. There was also with cycling another one here with an alternative cost against the usual mana cost, which is to sacrifice a land. But with these, the idea is you're just changing the type. With the usual cycling, you get to discard a card and then draw a card. With type cycling, you get to search your library for a type of card. And again, going back to the tribal thing again, of course, another tribe very heavily represented in the set was Slivers, not surprisingly, or was in the set, should I say. Death Touch was a thing, and there was one of those. Whenever this creature deals damage to a creature, destroy that creature. We had Delve and 3 Delve cards. So with Delve, you may remove any number of cards in your graveyard from the game. As you play the spell, it costs 1 less to play for each card removed this way. Another graveyard shenanigans thing, which is Dredge, single Dredge card. So Dredge 2, if you would draw a card, instead you may put exactly 2 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard. If you do, return this card from your graveyard to your hand, otherwise draw a card. Double Strike was a thing. One card with Double Strike on it. Does exactly what it says. Causes double damage, hits twice. You can see here, interesting, this had a -1 as well on it. Very interesting. Look, yes, it is -1. While its power is -1 or 0, it simply does no damage. First strike damage step will be created if Char Rumbler is in combat, even if its power is 0 or less. So essentially, when it's doing double strike, the first strike is a first strike hit, and then there's the regular hit. And there's all sorts of interesting notes here about what happens if you change, because that potentially, I suppose, could happen. Because Char Rumbler's power is normally negative, you'll have to give it at least +2/+2 before it will deal damage. It won't negative damage. Is your brain exploding yet? Echo. So 4 Echo cards, 3 in red, 1 in black. And you can see here we've got some interesting Echo costs as well. One here, sacrifice 2 lands, one here, discard a card. Regular costing here. So with Echo at the beginning of your upkeep, if this came under your control since the beginning of your last upkeep. Sacrifice permanent unless you pay its echo cost. Fate Seal. So Fate Seal 1, its controller looks at the top card of an opponent's library, then he or she may put that card on the bottom of your library. We're probably mostly, if you've got into Magic post this particular set, then you're probably most familiar with that turning up on a particular version of Jace. One of the abilities on there is a Fate Seal ability, although it doesn't specifically say Fate Seal, it spells it out. So what other Fs did we have in the set? Because this is obviously going through in alphabetical order. And you may have seen this already. We had a couple of flanking cards. It's an old Magic ability. So whenever a creature without flanking blocks, this creature, the blocking creature, gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Good old Flash. Quite a few flash cards, 10 of them. So you may play this spell anytime you could play an instant. Also, while we're talking about flash, there was flashback, only one of these. It also had cycling on it, so you may play this card from the graveyard for its flashback cost and then remove it from the game. Another F was Fortify, which we've seen already because we looked at Indestructible and Darksteel Garrison. So you attach it to a target land you control, Fortify only as a sorcery. This card comes into play unattached and stays in play if the land leaves play. So definite advantages over, say, a straight aura, which would, aura that enchants something that doesn't stay on the battlefield once the thing it's enchanted is destroyed, unless it's got additional abilities that allow it to be bounced back to the hand or something like that. So yeah, interesting to see that, like I said, with an artifact. Frenzy. It's on a single sliver. All sliver creatures have Frenzy 1. Whenever a sliver attacks and isn't blocked, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Graft. You'll see a few things in this set which come in from the previous block, actually. So with Graft 1, this land comes into play with +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever a creature comes into play, you may move a +1/+1 counter from this land into it. Grandeur. Slightly more Grandeur cards. So with Grandeur, discard another card named whatever the card name is. You can see there. Believe that's the same for all of these. Yep. Notice they're all legendary creatures. Target player can't play spells this turn, and creatures that player controls can't attack this turn. So each one of these has a slightly different ability if you trigger Grandeur. So obviously your deck needs to have multiple legendary creatures in it. Gravestorm, which actually I better spell that out properly, or at least enough to separate it from Graveyard. Single Gravestorm, so when you play this spell, copy it for each of its permanent, put into the graveyard this turn. You may choose new targets for the copies. So we're about halfway through the keywords and abilities at the moment. Okay. 4 Hellbent cards. So with Hellbent cares about you having no cards in hand, but the abilities you can see are quite different on the different cards. So This one gets shadow if you have no cards in hand. This one you skip your upkeep step. This one you +2/+2, and then this one does have an activation cost on it. 1 and a red, tap. Kelden Megalith deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Play this ability only if you have no cards in hand. Oh yes, of course, Kicker was in here, wasn't it? Which then we went on to see as multi-kicker a lot later on. So with Kicker 4, you may pay an additional 4 as you play this spell. And then if the Kicker cost was paid, then you get something extra. And this is a keyword we have seen before. Lifelink, another thing, and you see, with lifelink here, so whenever whatever it is, whenever the permanent in question deals damage, you gain life. And you might see this in earlier sets, maybe that was spelt out, but in here there's a specific keyword for that. So with Madness, what have we got? So you can see several here have a couple of abilities on them. So Madness and one other one. So with this one, so Madness, if you discard this card, you may play it for its Madness cost instead of putting it into your graveyard. And there's a cost attributed with that. We have Morph, which is another one we've seen before. Slightly more cards with Morph than other ones in the set. So we've got 7 Morph cards. So these you can play face down. So you may play the card face down as a 2/2 creature for 3, and then at any point you can turn it up for its Morph cost. Flip it for its Morph cost. Of course you can just play it regularly for its regular cost. And with some of these you'll see the Morph cost may include a colour which isn't in the actual casting cost. We've also got an artifact with Morph on it and a land as well. But the similarity is, this playing it down as a 2/2 creature for 3. And then the Morph does something interesting. Oh, poisonous, of course. So with some of these, of course, they're pretty diluted in the set. So we've got poisonous 3. I mean, one of these is it common and one's uncommon. So all sliver creatures has poisonous. Of course, with it being on a sliver creature and it doing that, then it stretches it a lot more throughout the set. So it would have been a bigger, had a wider impact because of that than just having a regular poisonous creature, particularly with the fact that it's at common. But then you could also use this to enchant other creatures and give them poisonous. With poisonous, whenever a sliver deals combat damage to a player, that player gets a poison counter. A player with 10 or more poison counters loses the game. And again, later sets we've seen this come back. We've seen it, the wording slightly changed as well. I mentioned reach already, I think. But there's just one single card with reach in it in this set. 9 cards with scry on them. So with scry, there's a certain scry value, and that can be, triggered. You can see here by various things or not. Depends. So you look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put any number of them back on the bottom of your library and rest on the top in any order. So it's interesting in the set and the block as a whole, there's quite a bit of sort of top deck library manipulation potentially going on as well. Oh, here's an oldie but goodie. Another S. Shadow. So 5 of those. So with Shadow, so this creature can block or be blocked only by creatures with Shadow. Also, we've got Shadow and Hellbent combined as well there. So it won't be triggered unless Hellbent is triggered. And again, stuff like combined up with other abilities as well. So often with these, there's obviously more than one keyworded ability on here. Oh, as we're on S, you can probably guess what's coming next. Single Shroud card also has split second on it as well, which I'll come on to in a moment. So with Shroud, this permanent can't be the target of spells or ability. So let's see. Three cards with split second. And with split second, as long as a spell is on the stack, players can't play spells and or active abilities that aren't mana abilities. We also have Storm, 3 Storm cards. I mentioned earlier there was also specifically Gravestorm. So that was to do with, so when you play the spell, copy it for each permanent, put it into a graveyard this turn. With sort of Gravestorm, with the regular Storm, when you play the spell, copy it for each spell played before in this turn. So we've got two cards with, actually one card with, this is called Storm Entity. I should have been a bit more specific here. Yeah, so actually only one card with Storm, one card with Gravestorm, and one card called Storm. So, yeah. Oh, no surprise that you'll see that Suspend is in here. Quite a few Suspend cards either had a Suspend ability or cared about Suspend cards. So with Suspend, just to remind you, because this was in a previous set in the block, so Suspend 3 on this is an example. So 2 and a green to do that, and then rather than play this card from your hand, you may play 2 and a green and remove it from the game. It has 3 time counters on it. In this case, that's what that ties in with. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter. When the last is removed, play it without paying its mana cost. I'm not sure if we had any ones which had, there was, if you remember earlier, there was earlier set where there was a number that had a 0. Though you could only suspend it, I think. There was no casting cost, but with these there is always a casting cost that goes with it. That one just allows you to bounce a Suspend card. Another card that's about caring about Suspend going on there. So yeah, Suspend. Nearly there in terms of the keywords abilities. But it is worth going through all of these because just to see how complex the set and how few in some there were. So Transfigure, 1 again, 1 and 2 black, sacrifices creature, search your library for a creature card with the same converted mana cost as this creature and put that card into play. Then shuffle your library, play only as a sorcery. Again, later on in Magic, seeing sort of similar things going on. Maybe called something different, but yeah. So, quite a lot of experimentation going on here. Transmute. Discard this card, search your library for a card with converted cost mana 0 because this is a land. Reveal it and put it into your card, then shuffle your library, play it only as a sorcery. And then also Vanishing. If I can spell Vanishing. 4 vanishing cards. So another thing with time counters, and this came from other set in the block. This permanent comes into play with 2 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter from it. When the last is removed, sacrifice it. So no real surprise to see, you know, the ones we looked at, a number of those are abilities that were from other sets in the block, because of course if you're drafting the smaller sets, they're going to be invariably drafted with another set or sets. So yes, wow. So let me just have a sip of a drink before we move on. So, Cycle of Augurs. Common creatures with activated abilities that require the creature to be sacrificed. That's what those are all about. 1 of each colour. We have, remember we were looking at cycling as an ability. There was, you know, I mentioned that there was it looked like there would be some common cyclers, and if you look down here, I think you see that is the case. So we've got 6 here, but if we have the rarity as common, you can see now those are the cycling cycle. Now we have there was various cycles of slivers from looking at this. You'll see here. So there's my cycle of slivers, all of which have the future frame. Now, just out of curiosity, you'll see that. So that's the difference. So the cycle is the 5 future shifted slivers, and then the 6th sliver in this set is the legendary. I also, when we looked at grandeur, we noticed something interesting there, in that the 5 cards with grandeur are also 5 rare legendary creatures, and what they depict is effectively the descendant of a prominently legendary creature in Magic's history. Each card also has the new mechanic grandeur on it, and so when such a card is in play, each allows a player to discard a card with the same name to generate a powerful effect. And you can see I pointed this out earlier, but yeah, that is indeed a cycle there. In terms of the sort of descendant that it's related to, so we've got Orim Samite Healer, but also Cho Mana Revolutionary, I understand as well, could be argued. Alexi Zephyr Mage for this one, Dakan Black Blade. This is obviously Rorik's Blade Wing, and this would be Camel Fist of Crosa. Now we have a cycle of Magi in here, so with the name Magus in their title. Magus of the Moat, Magus of the Future, Magus of the Abyss, Magus of the Moon, and Magus of the Vineyard. Another thing you'll notice, there were references in most of these sets, if not all of them, we've seen it, back to other cards from previous sets. So with this one, these are wizard creatures with the abilities of enchantment from a previous set. So this one was Moat, this one was Future Sight, this one was the Abyss, this one was Blood Moon, and this one was Vineyard. Interesting set of non-basic lands in here. So again, when I go through the different types, we'll just look and see how that pans out within the set as a whole, but you'll notice that there were some uncommon lands in here, and you can see out of the uncommon lands, if you do it that way. You can do this, filter this a couple of ways. One is you can just filter out, minus out the future lands. The other way is to only include that come into play tapped. They were all tap lands, but they each had an ability that had previously not been printed on lands, and they also tap for 1 mana of the respective colour. So they're pretty cool. It's always nice to see sort of utility lands in a set as well, I think, you know, for use in say Commander. Now, a cycle of pacts. So these were all 0 costs. So rare instant spell with a mana cost of 0, but with a cost that is to be paid during the caster's next upkeep, lest the player lose the game. So really important that you have mana to basically do this. This cycle, according to Mark Rosewater, is inspired by Unhinged rocket-powered turbo slug. So one for each of the colours, and because there's no casting cost here, it does just reiterate what the colour of the spell is, and then you get to do something here, but as I've said at the beginning of your next upkeep, you have to pay a mana cost, and if you don't, you lose the game. And as you can see, at the time it comes into play, you know, that could have a pretty major effect there. So, of course, depending on the board state, of course. So we had an interesting cycle of recurring suspend spells. So you saw that there was quite a few suspend spells I pointed out, but there was certain ones here which, you know, there was quite a bit of variability in here in terms of how that suspend manifested itself. So there were a cycle of uncommon sorcery spells which had this suspend 3-2 and then a colour and an ability that allows them to be suspended once played on there. So rather than play this card from your hand, you may pay 2 and a white and remove it from the game with 3 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter. When the last is removed, play it without paying its mana cost. But you'll notice here, this is this recurring bit. So until the next turn, creatures can't attack you. Remove Chromatic Escape from the game with 3 time counters on it. So it just sort of keeps, you know, recurring. So you notice that there were some future shifted cards in here as well that were vanilla cards. So there are no abilities. They're the only cards to have textless frames at that point, other than promotional cards and such like. But you know, within a regular set. So if I just bring up this here, you can see here this is you can do a search for is vanilla in the set. So there they are. There's the 5 that are there. I mentioned the possibility, I think, that the spell shapers themselves might be there might be a type a cycle within there because of the few. And what you'll notice is that yes, if you minus out the artifact, then indeed, yep, there is the cycle. So they have an activated ability that creates a creature token that in all but one case duplicates a common creature with a converted mana cost from Magic's past, including name but not mana cost. Now, you could argue that if I bring that back in, that in fact was a sixth card in there, because you can see here it did exactly that. So there was a sixth artifact card. So gold milled. So just to explain, you know, the token it's producing. So gold milled Harrier, you can see Cloud Sprite, Festering Goblin. This was actually Spark Elemental, yeah. And we have Llanowar Elves. And then this one was Metallic Sliver. So another cycle of lands. There were some dual lands in here actually, and these were future shifted. So if we put in the frame command, and I will now put that in, and if we filter that out, because I said they were lands, so if we have a type of land, these should bubble up. So they weren't the only future shifted non-basics in the set. You can see down here we've got there's a couple here, there's several here actually, more than a couple, that don't necessarily you know, fit into the cycle. And what was interesting is the way, if you like, that the mana was actually added. It's sort of variable. So with Nimbus Maze, you can see here it's sort of conditional. So it's white blue, but it is conditional. River of Tears is blue black, and again conditional in some way, but slightly different than the condition here. Graven Khans acts more like a filter land, but for black red. Grave of the Burn Willows, probably a bit more like a straightforward you know, two-color dual land, but again something a little bit different. It generates mana when you gives one life to each opponent. And then Horizon Canopy, again, you know, it is a two-color land, but different than all the other two-color lands. So interesting cycle in there. And as I said, those weren't the only lands that had future frames in. Then there was Dryad Arbor, which was just a reminder, it was actually a land creature, so it isn't a spell, but it is affected by summoning sickness, and it has tap, add green to your mana pool, and it's green because there's no green casting cost up here. And then we had Zoetic Land Cavern, which you tap for colourless, but also had Morph on it as well. There's actually, this forms part of a vertical cycle, and what that was to just illustrate this. It was Morph, but it was Morph that was not on a creature, I believe. So there you go. So there was a vertical cycle. I love the other thing I didn't point out here. I'll go back and show you on the frames in a moment. Look at the little sort of indicator of the type of thing it is. So just going back to this vertical cycle here. So let me just put that in the right order so you can just see correctly. So Lumithread Field is the common, Certic Cavern is the uncommon, and Wet Weald is the rare, and they're all not they're not creatures. So one's an enchantment, one's a land, and one's an artifact. So you're missing a creature, and that was a vertical cycle. Functional reprint side of things, and again, yeah, it's just reminded me. You can see here, look. So creature looked like a sort of coarse, a claw swipe. Enchantment had this like half a sun type thing. You can see there. Instance got that sort of lightning spark. Artifacts had a goblet symbol. Then with land, we had this symbol here, but also for the Dryad Arbor they did something a bit different because it was a creature land. Just go back. So yeah, anything that was a combination had that symbol on it. You can see there. I mentioned enchantments already. So I'm just curious, did they do anything? So yeah, sorcery. That looks like half a flame to me anyway. So yeah, interesting. Didn't do anything special for the legendaries though. Still had that claw swipe on them. I think that's what it's supposed to be. Yeah, so reprints. This is a functional reprint of Obsidian Giant from Portal. Obviously that was in a different frame. And Barren Glory was a reprint, well, a near functional reprint of The Cheese Stands Alone from Unglued. Yeah. And I'm not going to go through them all, but there was a load of notable cards: Grove of the Burnt Willows, Bridge from Below, Mages of the Moon, Narcomoeba. We might see them as we go through at the end, actually. Rift Sweeper, Sarcomite Mere, Sword of the Meek, Tarmogoyf, which we'll no doubt see because it's an expensive card, Tombstalker, and Dryad Arbor, which we've already seen. So looking at the different creature types, we've got 9 creatures in total that are legendaries, or sorry, 9 legendaries in total, of which 8 of those are creatures. 5 of those are part of a cycle. The other ones just, a little bit random. Obviously there were wizards in the set. So we got Venser, Shaper Savant, slivers here. So we've got a 5-color sliver. We've got Jorah, and I did a quick search on humans as well. So human wizards thing. Although this one, interestingly, it's blue-red, cares about time counters and suspend. And then we've got a Chrome's Memorial, which was a legendary artifact. Creatures you control have flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, protection from black, and protection from red. So interesting interactions in there as well, that certain creatures that care about other creatures having abilities attributed to them as well. And a great set for that as well, generally, when you think about it. So legendaries. I put in land here as well, just to remind me before I go through the other ones. So 12 lands, of which we've seen 2 of the cycles already. So there was a monocolored cycle. Then there were these two coloured lands, each of which had a different twist on the way in which the two colours were generated or another ability stapled to them, and then the Dryad Arbor and the Zoetic Cavern as well. And if we put these in rarity order as well, that may be a little easier to see. Or not. So yeah, nothing uncommon. I suppose that's what I'm trying to get at here. So cycle at rare, and then the two ones that weren't part of that second cycle at uncommons were also at uncommon: the Dryad Arbor and the Zoetic Cavern. Now, before we go back to the set again, as you know I like to do here, just get a basic overview of the different types and what was maybe happening. So we've got 97 creatures across both sets of borders, of which quite a mixed bag. We're seeing a lot of humans, quite a lot of wizards, got the odd horror here. And they seem to be bringing in maybe creature types that we hadn't seen for a while. I'm not sure the last time they did in a Freet, actually. Got homunculus, beast, elementals, lizards. We've got an elf spell shaper, Kithkin, which would see predominance in I think the next block after 10th edition. Number of Kithkin. There's a fungus. We were talking about fungus earlier, Wrath. So yeah, apart from certain tribal cards that there are a number of creatures, you then got like a quite a random assortment of a number of different creature types as well. Okay, so 28 enchantments in here, again some of which were on this future shifted board card. Also interesting things that we haven't really covered, like things like this: creatures with no abilities get +2/+2. So you could argue there was a theme of vanilla matters in this as well. So 28 cards that were enchantments. Within that, so of that, 16 auras. So enchantments that attach themselves to something. But thinking about just ones that were just enchantments, then there were 12. There was, one enchantment creature as well. Now, moving on to artifacts. You can see we've got 11 artifacts. We had this interesting fortification as well in the set. Again, no surprise to see some artifact creatures. In terms of equipment, there was just one piece of equipment in there, and obviously that's pretty easy to work out, but there were 10 cards which were artifacts but not equipment. "18 sorceries," again, both future shifted and non-future shifted cards. If I sort by colour, sometimes it's easier to see the sort of typical things that might crop up. So in white, sorcery speed, we've got a bit of vigilance going on, bit of like a fog effect. Here in white, some card draw, some scrying, so some library manipulation. bounce, the ability to remove cards from the game in black, -1/-1 against your opponent, -3/-3 on a particular creature, so again removal here. Hand hate, and also card draw in black, but at the cost of life that was tied to the number of creatures. Red, we see sorcery speed damage here, asymmetrical pump, X damage spell here. There's our 3 damage spell. Pump in green, sorcery speed. Basic land, tutoring in green, life gain, and then we've got this 2-colour card. Choose a multicolored card from outside the game. So outside the game, tutoring. Always interesting to see those. They don't always crop up very often, but yeah. 20 instants. So a lot more things going on the instance side of things. So let's try and, because there's so many, let's try and get a feel for this. So we got a bit of life gain going on. There's one card there with life gain at instant speed. Other sorts of things we might be interested in. So damage, either damage prevention or doing damage at instant speed. Interestingly, this Ghost Fire, so 2 in a red, but it was counted as a colourless card, interestingly enough. So that was something interesting to do again. Almost the reverse of like a coloured artifact in some ways. So 3 cards at instant speed that have some sort of destruction in them. Got Slaughter Pack, which was one of those 0 costs where you have to pay for it at the beginning of the next upkeep or you lose the game. This one's against green creatures, this one's against enchantments. Let's just see whether we've got any. Remove, no. Any ones that affect the game at instant speed in some way. Obviously the pacts, because you could lose the game. Any bounce like at instant speed. Venser's Diffusion is another one. Oh, tokens, of course. Tokens in generation is another interesting thing to see. So I got some instant speed token stuff going on. I think I'd already mentioned about life gain as well. So yeah, quite a variety of things going on at instant speed here. And our usual, of course, we've got counters in the set, so this might mess this up a bit, but we've got delay there. We can counter a target spell, but there's a bit of a extra bit of shenanigans going on there. Wow. Yeah, so really fascinating set of twists and turns in this set to see there. So cool, yeah. So back to the set as a whole, as I said, 180 cards. Been through so many cards now with different angles that I don't really feel the need to re-scroll through these and necessarily pick these out. But it is something that's valuable doing in your own time, because beyond that, things got quite granular. Like there were some quite interesting twists and turns in the set beyond the usual keywords and abilities, just thematically, which are quite difficult to search for in this, and really you just need to scroll through with this as well. Yeah, like, look at all the just twists and turns in the set. Stuff that can be played from your graveyard. Yeah. Again, you know, people very kindly commented on their memories of this set and this particular era in Magic. So again, I encourage you, if you feel comfortable doing that, to just, you know, comment about your own experience at this time. I would be really curious, because it just you've already telling my voice, even though I probably would have dreaded playing this at the time, and it was tough enough playing like after the fact, after I've had a bit of experience with Magic cards. But I just love there's just so much stuff in here. You could just spend, you know, hours just looking through all these like different things and angles, and yeah, certainly they were very inventive in there. Did up the complexity level quite considerably on there. So price wise, good old Tarmogoyf. So $57 in Future Sight. I think that is bar the box topper, which is a bit of a special thing. That's the most expensive version of it. It's cropped up in Masters a few times there, in reprinted. I was curious about these actually, because these had such interesting combinations and ways in which the colour was generated. There's a cycle as a whole, which ones would bubble to the surface, and yeah, and how whether they'd been reprinted. Interesting, it was in Zendikar Expeditions, but the original's much nicer, I think. Yeah, I prefer the original personally. What do they do for interesting? It's fascinating. So the Zendikar Rising expeditions are $23. The Zendikar expeditions are $62. Future Sight version there for $32. Oh yeah, I expected this to be on the pricier side. So $24 for a, you know, Sliver Commander. It did turn up in Time Spiral remastered. Bitter Ordeal. It's only been printed in Future Sight. Search target player's library for a card and exile it. Okay, and that player shuffles, and we've got the Gravestorm as well. $19 there. Oh, yeah, the Pacts. No surprise there. This one has been reprinted a few times. Pact of Negation. Clocking at 18. Slightly cheaper version in Modern Masters, and it was redone for the Time Spiral remastered, because of course this whole block as a whole was remastered and done in paper. Graven Cairns, however you say that. I love this as well. It gives you like related searches. So I was going to say at the time, but I didn't want to misspeak. But this was something. This particular thing was something that cropped up in Shadowmoor. I just wouldn't be able to remember the set at the time. So yeah, $14.93. Again, it's come up. You can see in some of the other sets. There it is in Shadowmoor. Grove of the Burn Willows, $12. Chroma's Memorial. I do like this card. I should remember this a bit more when I'm doing the Commander Durdle, kind of Commander, Durdle episodes. $11.65. Oh, Veilstone Amulet. Now that's curious. Let me just do something. I know I did already look at the artifacts, but let me just have another look at that. Yeah, that was what I was curious about, the Coalition Relic. That may come up in a moment, but yeah, it just reminded me about, there's a few rather nice straight artifacts in here in addition to the Sword of the Meek, Veilstone Amulet. Right, so going back here, this whenever you play a spell, creatures you control can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control this turn. There's a Magus there, just above $10, so we're getting close. And Summoner's Pact, we're just below. So interestingly how many of these, sometimes we go through a set and we notice, oh, well, there's only one time it's ever been, printed, and that was in the set, but quite a few more of these have been reprinted, albeit in special sets. Oh, there's River of Tears, ended up in Iconic Masters. Oh, my friend here was actually in the From the Vault 20, and so on. Daybreak Coronet, another interesting card, interesting Voltron card. Right, so that's the the expensive stuff. Now move on to the EDH friendly stuff, I suppose. Yeah, Pact of Negation, Aven Mind Sense, of course. Yeah, it's sort of Filter Land, Delay, Dryad Arbor, Venser, Rites of Flourishing, Dartmoor Salvage, Nimbus Mage, Chrome, Coalition Relic. I thought this might turn up at some point. Add 1 mana of any colour to your mana pool, put a charge counter on it. Beginning of a pre-combat main phase, remove all charge counters for Coalition. Add 1 mana of any colour. For each counter remove this way. 3 to cast. So interesting mana rock. Regenerate each creature you control. That's interesting. As Cloaky comes into play, choose the artifact, sorcery, enchantment. Sorcery spells you play of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. And more of the pacts here, and then this particular cycle, one of those. Yeah, so cool. In terms of the theme decks, and I know I don't always go through these, but I just wanted to show you, because we're getting to the end of the set. I've mentioned this before, you end up getting sets from earlier in the block that are incorporated in, and how they, which time-shifted cards also ended up in as well. So we've got Fate Blaster, which is designed to let you get ahead of yourself. You head into the future. So we've got 2 rares, Magus of the Future and Shapeshifter's Morrow. We've also got time-shifted cards from Time Spiral, Dandan and Uthden Troll. Next, so that was it blue-red in there. No mana fixing, probably because those were at a higher rarity. So more, are you worried about the future? Peace will be declared across the multiverse. Have no fears, as the future shock deck proves tomorrow's Magic games will be filled with many fierce beasts, warriors and brutes, slavering for a fight as you could hope for. And you get a sneak peek. That's because this deck contains nothing but basic lands and future sight time-shifted cards. Okay, so it's all time-shifted stuff. Therefore, there's all future shifted stuff. There's no time-shifted cards from Time Spiral in here. We've got Baru, we've got Quagnoth, Rebels Unite, Rebels in your graveyard, Plains, Swamps. Of course, Terramorphic Expanse was in the block. Angel of Salvation and Mages of the Abyss. We've got Defiant Vanguard from Time Spiral. And then Suspended Sentence. Yeah, you probably tell by the title they're using both Suspend and Vanishing cards to mess with Time Stream. We got Nilith, I think that is. And Shimian Spectre. And no time-shifted cards. So cool. So yeah, those are the associated theme decks. Again, you know, they'd have basic land in them from the first set of the block, and also cards, as you've seen already, but other cards beyond the time-shifted cards from the previous, potentially from the previous set and the set before. So the other two sets in the block. And then finally, just a sneak peek ahead to Wednesday's video. So my card pool, I managed to get a card pool with Venser in it, so I'm going to build a mono blue wizard deck around Venser. You can see here I'm going to have to do quite a bit of pruning just to remove all of the multiple copies and colour cards that aren't on colour, for here's a colour identity, and then we'll go from there. I suspect we're going to end up with obviously a blue wizard tribal with some sort of maybe bounce going on. It's also got flash on it as well, which is pretty cool, so we'll see where we can go with that. Obviously I'll leave in as many blue cards that are thematically relevant either to Venser or are just, you know, a good card to have in this type of deck, but we'll see. I've got a Narcomoeba there as well, interestingly enough. I don't really think that's going to do anything, but again we've already got a few. It'd be interesting to see what sort of artifacts we have as well. But anyway, that's for another episode. So hope you've enjoyed that. Thanks once again for watching, and bye for now, and I will see you in the next video.